The devastating news that Remy Ma, the strong and legendary rapper, has only 24 hours to live has struck the globe in shock and bewilderment. Her family, friends, and hordes of admirers are dealing with a maelstrom of anxiety, heartache, and destruction as a result of this unimaginable blow. As those closest to her prepare for the worst, the emotional toll behind closed doors is unfathomable. Among them, her husband Papoose, who has been her pillar of support and steadfast companion, is breaking under the strain of this harsh reality. As he clings frantically to the dwindling prospect of a miracle, witnesses have reported him sobbing, his customary fortitude replaced by genuine vulnerability. But with time running out, the question of whether it's really too late looms big. Who is responsible for Remy's abrupt and catastrophic fall, and what startling circumstances resulted in this dire prognosis? The answers are being revealed in real time. And the story is so compelling and heartbreaking that it's hard to turn away. Tension permeates the atmosphere in Remy Ma's hospital room. The dismal fact is silently confirmed by the somber expressions of the doctors hovering around her bedside. The woman is currently fighting for her life after being praised as an irresistible force in hip-hop, whose voice commanded stages and whose tenacity inspired millions. The world finds it difficult to comprehend how someone so bright could be on the verge of oblivion when she was warned just hours ago that her time was running out. Just 24 hours. Her health isn't the only issue, though. The strain is causing her family's dynamics to collapse. She is surrounded by Papoose, who is lost in a storm of bewilderment, rage, and powerlessness. The guy who has always protected her is suddenly breaking down in sobs, his hands shaking as he holds hers and begs her to stay. As he watches the love of his life disappear, what's going through his head? Will he strive to keep her with him until the very end, or can he accept that her fate might be set? However, there are other factors influencing this developing tragedy besides Papoose's suffering. Deeper questions linger beneath the surface, adding complexity to an already hectic setting. Remy's family and friends struggle with a web of guilt, annoyance, and confusion while medical professionals rush to treat her illness. Could someone be held accountable for her unexpected breakdown? How could things have gone so wrong so fast? Remy Ma's life has never been simple. She had to overcome many obstacles on her path from the streets to fame, and her private hardships were made public. This time, however, it's the present, a relentless force that came out of nowhere rather than her history coming back to haunt her. It seemed like a typical day when it all started, when Remy performed at a high-profile event to commemorate the release of her most recent album. She was in her element. As she dominated the stage, the audience loved her and fed off her enthusiasm, demonstrating her continued influence in the business. It all seemed ideal until it wasn't. It began quietly, with a brief dizziness and a sudden intense pain in her chest. Then suddenly she fell apart. As fans and personnel rushed to her side, the room erupted in frenzy, but it was instantly clear how serious the situation was. She was taken to the hospital by paramedics, where a battery of tests showed the terrifying reality. Her condition was catastrophic and much worse than anyone could have predicted. She was unaware of the underlying illness that was killing her body, and the harm was happening at a startling rate. Once a sign of her strength, her heart was failing her. Papoose and her family were dealt a tragic blow by the doctors at that point. They had 24 hours to take action, but nothing could be done. Everyone in the room was shaken by Papoose's visceral gut punch of emotion. The guide who had been Remy's confidant and bulwark during every storm appeared to be falling apart. He grabbed her hand while he sobbed uncontrollably and pleaded with her not to leave him. In sharp contrast to the indestructible image he had always projected, the scene was one of absolute desolation. But underlying his sadness, a persistent thought began to grow. How had they come to this? How had the invincible woman he knew, Remy, degenerated to the point of near death? Was there a clue he had missed, a moment he had let slip? His anguish was heightened by the silent agony of guilt that started to devour him. The tragedy was only made worse by the doctor's explanation. For months, Remy's health had been steadily declining, concealed by her unwavering will. She was too preoccupied with her job, her songs, and her fans' expectations to notice the warning symptoms, which included weariness and temporary pains. She had refused to slow down, constantly moving forward and putting up a brave front for everyone. However, her body was unable to continue, and it had now reached a breaking point from which it was impossible to recover. Her family was also caught off guard. As if denying the reality could change it, Remy's mother, her strongest supporter, sat in astonished denial and muttered, "This can't be happening." The doctors, however, were adamant. Remy's illness was terminal and time was running out. As the hours passed, the hospital room turned into a furnace of unfiltered emotion. Not only was there sadness in the air, but there was also tension as long-kept secrets and betrayals came to light. Papoose wasn't the only one who wondered how things had gotten so out of control. Family and friends whispered to one another, had someone let her down? Was it her unrelenting way of life? Some cited her demanding workload and the ongoing pressure to maintain her position as a titan in a competitive business. Others questioned whether those closest to her had disregarded the warnings because they were too preoccupied with her orbit to see that her light was waning. No one wanted to take the blame, despite the accusations being made and the defensive and contradictory responses. The harsh realization that Remy Ma, the rap queen, would not live until morning made these arguments seem more pointless as the night went on. Papoose stayed by her side, whispering to her while his tears stained the hospital blankets. His voice broke as he gulped, "How could I live without you? You can't abandon me right now, we've been through so much." The quiet beeping of the monitors served as a harsh reminder of her vulnerability, while his anguish reverberated around the sterile room. As loved ones arrived, the collective grief grew stronger as their farewells were filled with agony. As though the stress of the situation had broken their relationship, Remy's sisters, who had formerly been inseparable with her, stood aside and were unwilling to look into her eyes. But distrust lingered in the midst of the grieving. Was she really this sick, or is something else going on? A cousin asked, echoing what others were thinking. Had Papoose knew more than he revealed? Was the looming issue? Had he lost opportunities to step in? Reliving months of late-night studio sessions, non-stop concerts, and Remy's unyielding reluctance to take a break, he started asking himself the same question. Had he allowed her, oblivious to her willpower? With each beep serving as a countdown to the inevitable, the monitor's constant cadence emphasized how fleeting the time was. As fatigue set in, Remy's mother's prayers became fewer and fewer as she gripped a tissue. She muttered, her resistance giving way to despair, "She's too young." The blame game was boiling beneath the astonished quiet of the family. When Papoose realized he couldn't save her this time, he felt a smothering sense of hopelessness. Although he had always been her mooring, he was now at sea and helpless to stop the tide from dragging her away. He recalled all the times he had asked her to take a break, and she had laughed it off. With her smile acting as a shield, she would say, "I'm built for this." Had she been mistaken, though? Had they both? In order to stop the unrelenting progression of her illness, the doctors had tried every possible course of action, including tests, experts, and medications. After years of relentless ambition, her body had finally given up. Papoose was not leaving, so it felt pointless for a nurse to gently warn that visiting hours were coming to an end. She said, "Get yourselves ready," but how could he? He was so desperate that, while he knew in his heart that it was too late, he called every number and offered any sum for a miracle. As daylight approached, the air became heavy with whispered regrets, and the room became oppressive. Then the monitors stumbled just before dawn. Doctors hurried in, their anxious voices piercing the mist, and chaos broke out. As the medical staff struggled to stabilize her, Papoose held his breath and prayed against hope. Every second was a lifetime, and time stretched into an excruciating eternity. At last, a doctor turned to face him, her eyes speaking for him where words could not. Sobs, cries, and the sound of his world falling apart were all that followed. The woman who had conquered all odds was gone forever as he fell to his knees and gripped the bed. Once full with hope, the room was now filled with sorrow. Remy's family clung to one another, the weight of their loss too heavy to bear. The life he had created with her was reduced to memories, and Papoose felt suffocated. But in the midst of his suffering, a resolution emerged. This was a reckoning as much as a tragedy. He would make sure Remy's legacy lived on because she had fought for everything. She was a warrior in addition to being a mother, a wife, and a rapper. Her narrative would endure even after she passed away, serving as a reminder of the transient nature of life and a monument to a life fiercely lived.